I coach all sorts of people, but their problems are a little bit advanced. So you were talking about H. pylori and SIBO and things like that. Like those are the kinds of cases I love to work. Boy, this is a heated topic. I've definitely upset a lot of people talking about this.
This episode is brought to you by First Detachment. First Detachment is an expert formulated supplement company founded by renowned coach Justin Harris. We've combined science with real-world experience in each product. We are battle tested. Are you? Find your battle today at firstdetachment.com. All right, we're live here with Kolton Lukes. Thanks so much for joining us. Coach Kolton Lukes, you can find him on Instagram, Kolton_red. Just tremendous amount of knowledge. He's really been kind of bursting on the scene, jumping around different podcasts. We're going to get into it today, obviously, but a really interesting background. So I think it's pretty cool for the audience out there to kind of walk through it. And then, I think we'll scratch the surface on your knowledge today a little bit, and then definitely probably in the future, we'll gather up the comment section and have you back on. I know you've been invited back on to some other podcasts and things. I know, health and fitness and, those types of things are really a passion of yours, and it shows in your content. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. It's been wild because we connected a while back and it was just sort of a sporadic thing. And ever since then, it's been like, I've just started to connect with the whole family here. And it's like, the coolest thing. I talk to Big Paul all the time. I'm talking to you. I'm talking to Dani and Dave and all these people. It's like really, it's the coolest thing. So
yeah. Just stay away from them on leg day. I'll just tell you that.
They're psychopaths.
No, we were down in Texas for a seminar, and Dani's like this close to me, like, feel the weight, go slow down. I'm just like thinking, get away from me. But she was right. She was right.
We were at Destination Dallas one time, and I was just training on my own, and she was deadlifting an obscene amount of weight. Like, everyone's looking at her, and she just rips it off the ground, and she walks over to me really aggressively, and she's like, reaches her hand out and goes to shake my hand, and like, hey, I'm Dani, nice to meet you. Like, you just deadlifted more than 90% of the men in here who can do that. Like, there's no way, she just comes up, hey, I'm Dani, and just like the nicest person in the world. It's awesome.
Yeah. We didn't get a chance to check out Destination. We were down there. We the seminar was at Hidden Gym, but I heard a lot of good things about the gym, and I've seen it in a lot of the videos. So is that where you normally train, or?
I bounce around. I go to Hidden. I go to Destination. There's a couple Gold's gyms around here too that I go to. There's so much gym stuff to do in Dallas, which is where I'm located. It's like, you can't just go to one gym. There's like a gym for leg day. There's a gym for chest. There's a gym for arms. It's like,
that's what
everywhere.
That's why I hear that's pretty cool. No, there's a lot of good stuff there. Well, talk to us a little bit about, the one thing we were talking about off air, we'll get to, the fitness and coaching and how you got into physique training and things, but you were mentioning before you're in the military too.
Yeah.
Can you kind of walk us through what you did in the military and how that came about?
Yeah. So, this is, I've brought it up on a couple podcasts, and people have asked me to touch more on it. And I never really talked about it. Honestly, I thought about it. I'm like, wow, I've never discussed what I did in the military, but I was in the Army for 8 years. A lot of that time was spent behind a desk, thankfully, but I was a cavalry scout, which is like forward reconnaissance. So, we basically, we scout out the areas, we create, some sort of maps, just determining kind of like the topographical setting that we're in, kind of spot any enemies if we can. People say we're like the snipers without an actual sniper rifle. It's just basically stepping in front of everyone in the front lines and trying to map the areas out so people can get an idea of what the dead space out and about is. It was a really cool career. It was really cool. I jumped in right out of high school. I didn't really have a whole lot of guidance past like high school. My story's kind of wild. I was adopted and went through a whole series of events that led to me not having a ton of structure. And I was like, I really saw at that point, like, I need structure. I need something, like at least a person to tell me, hey, go this direction.
Yeah.
So I joined the military kind of for that, and ended up, creating this camaraderie with the people in there, and taught myself a lot of things for sure. But it was a good career. I started when I was 17. It was like my first year in the military. It was February 15th, 2015. And really like tore it up. It was a good time. The first couple years were like the typical Army stuff. You know, you're shooting all the weapon systems, M4s, M9s, 240 Bravos, 249s, like Mark 19s, 50 cals, like everything there is to offer, get your hands on and play with. And that was a really good time. As the career progressed, I was like, man, this stuff is beating me up, you know, 20K ruck marches and jumping out of helicopters and doing a lot of the stuff that knees don't genuinely love, was kind of taking its toll on my body. And I also developed at that time like a really big passion for manipulating my physique with diet and nutrition. At that point, you know, I was really fascinated with like, what is cutting, what is bulking, what is, you know, putting more mass on, what is getting leaner. And conducively, it wasn't awesome to be in the military and concurrently try to do those things. So it's like, how can I maybe take a step back from being all crazy and stuff and going full force into, you know, these really cool things, but limiting in the same breath. So I actually became a recruiter for a little bit of time, for 4 years almost, towards the end of my career, to step away and get into more of a controlled setting so I could focus more on bodybuilding. And I did that for a good 4 years. Probably the hardest time of my life, honestly. Recruiting was by far harder than any component of active duty military.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, it's like the highest stress sales job one could imagine. It's crazy. But it did allow me to like live a normal civilian life, bodybuild, compete, won my natural pro card in the PNBA during that time. And then at the end of 8 years, I was kind of like, you know what? I have all these people who are really interested in getting their bodies enhanced, better, overall improve what they're doing with themselves. And I felt like I was pretty confident in being able to take my career by its own hands, you know, do my own thing. And that's what I did. And I left the military. My contract ended and I got out honorably, thankfully, and then moved on and just started my own business from there. Like literally one day, it was crazy because like one day I was in the military in a uniform. The next day I was out on the, like, you know, just not in the military, like a normal guy. And it was, that feeling is quite abstract, I'll say that. You had like all this rigidity and you had to have your face shaved and your hair cut and you had a uniform every single day, and going from that to like, well, shit, I don't have to wake up at 4 a.m. Like, that's crazy, you know? So that was a transition, but it was, honestly, it was like a really good transition. I found that, you know, you can really take control of your time in life when you have your own will to work, you know, when you're able to bring your work capacity to the forefront of living. You can prove to yourself that like, holy shit, I can, you know, make a living. I can even exceed what I need for living and far beyond by myself. I don't need a organization or something of that nature.
Right. Yeah. And I'm curious to, you know, was it, what attracted you first to get into, you know, when you went into the military, and then maybe what are some things that you were able to take out of that and kind of apply?
Yeah. What attracted me first, to be honest with you, was like I said, the structure, but also the ability to do things that not many others could. I always kind of was, I idolized being the black sheep, if you will. And so it was really appealing to me to have the opportunity to jump out of helicopters, you know, go to different schools in the Army and learn how to shoot different weapon systems, or shoot at 600 yards or 700 yards, and, you know, drive a Hummer or a Bradley or all different types of stuff. Right. It's just, that experience in and of itself was really attractive, and it was a blast. Like I encourage, one of my unpopular opinions is I think everyone should serve in the military in some capacity.
Sure.
It was a blast. Like I learned so much, did so much that no one's ever going to be able to say like, I took a couple hand grenades and I threw them all at once, and like watched them explode. And like, no one does that. So it was for the exclusivity. Really. And in part of that, like I was a very lonely kid in high school. Like I loved training, and I brought my own food to school and stuff, and was like basically a bodybuilder back then. So I was like, man, I don't have like anybody. And then I thought like, well, if I join the military, I'll have friends, and they have to be my friends. So that was kind of the case. You know, like you get a lot of people surrounding you, and they become your family. I mean, the guys I met in there are literally to this day still communicating with me, and the closest people I have in my life. So,
yeah. I know I had a friend who little bit different scenario, but the structure really helped him a lot. To your point, this is years back, but he was 17. The judge was a retired Marine Corps, and he said, well, you know, you can go away for this many years, or you can join the Marine Corps. I'll let your mom, you know, if your mom will sign off on it. And he's like, looks like I'm going to the Marine Corps. But he said it was the best thing he ever did, because he said he was in all kinds of trouble and just chaos, but that really, you know, took all his energy and aggression and channeled it in a positive way. And, you know, I remember, you know, in our mid 20s, even just, you know, room was always tidy. He was always on time, clean looking, you know, he was always tight. And he's like, no, I was never like this before then. He's like, now I can't stop. So
yeah.
Well, good stuff. No, I want to talk a little bit about, you know, first we can kind of, I know there's a ton of knowledge and topics, so we'll kind of go through. I know you, on your Instagram, you post a lot of videos about these topics, so we'll kind of walk through some of them. But as far as your competition, you know, how long was your prep for that? And are there any things you noticed? I know you work with a lot of different athletes now, just being natural in that competition. Anything you notice may be different than what you see or hear from, you know, enhanced competitors? Just kind of curious that experience and how that was for you.
Yeah. So when I was, you know, competing naturally back then, it was a lot different. I didn't know a whole lot, you know, I just kind of, through the military, I knew that like blunt force trauma was the way to get things done, like just work and work more. So when I was coming up, you know, I would watch those old videos of like Ronnie Coleman when I was really young, like, you know, he's in his patrol car, had like the 5-gallon Tupperware of chicken and just kind of like grazed on it all day. And I was like, that's how you do it. Right. So like, just work hard and I can get like that. And so I didn't really have a objective ceiling in my mind. I just kind of knew if I worked hard, I'd keep going. And that's really how I did that first prep. It was all about kind of like, I did 75 minutes of cardio on the stair climber twice a day. I mean, it was wild. I thought cheat meals were an absolutely mandatory thing on a fat loss phase. So I'd go get like, it's sad to say now, but I'd get like a 16-inch pizza, like every 2 or 3 days, you know, and like use that as like my refeed. And it was a wild time. It was just fun. You know, bodybuilding was really fun back then, because you don't know any better, and you're just like, you're in this group of people, and it was a really good time. And that's, you know, it was kind of a blur, to be honest, because it was so much fun. I was just really enjoying my process, and I was on a team of bodybuilders. We were all kind of like on our own team, and so we were all hanging out together. We'd all train together. There was no training program. There was no like cardio regiment exactly. It was just kind of like, do your thing.
Yeah.
And we just kind of heard like in the background, in the periphery, it was like, okay, well, you can like do things to improve your performance. But it was sort of like this misnomer. We didn't know what that meant. It was like, okay, I'll take creatine. You know, like, what do you mean? Like, I'll just eat more chicken, like Ronnie Coleman. And then that progressed into like, okay, there's definitely people, because I would go to shows with people on my bodybuilding team, and I was like 170 pounds at that point. And I'd see dudes who are like 250 pounds and be like, what's going on here? Like, I see them training every day, and they're not doing anything different than me.
Right.
Just as much as them. Like, what's going on? So that kind of led me into that path. But when I stepped on stage, it was all just kind of about the fun of it. And I didn't even think I was going to win. I didn't know anything about bodybuilding. When you know, natural shows work very similar to, you know, regional level NPC shows. So you get in your class, a novice class, then an open class, and then an overall class. And I was winning each class. And I'm like, is it good to be in the center? Like, I didn't even know.
Yeah.
And then I won, and then I did it again and got my pro card. I'm in the PMBA. So it was just kind of like it's a blur to me, honestly, because it was just fun back then. You just obviously worked, and you didn't really care too much about the details.
Yeah, I remember I got to the point, because I've done powerlifting, strongman, bodybuilding, and then I ran a few 10Ks and a shorter distance triathlon. So don't ask, but it was always though that like I was kind of different, where I liked the work. I mean, I knew I was ready, or as ready as I could be, because I just didn't care about the outcome. So I was kind of a little bit opposite. I didn't really have much fun at the competitions. I just liked the process, you know, like even you know, a couple of years ago, I competed, my wife's just like, what's wrong with you? Like, you're not excited? I'm like, no. I was like, I just, I like the hard work, and then I know there's an end, and you kind of move on from there. And it's like, what's the next goal? It's, I guess it's the football coach in me, just kind of like the preparation for the game is more exciting than the actual game. And then I want to go over film and figure out how do we improve from there, so it's,
I agree with that a ton, man. So that's why that's a lot of the reasons why I left the military and to get into business, because there is a ceiling, when you're in the military, there's time and grade. So you can't exceed a certain rank. Once you have to meet a certain time of service. And my career was insane. So people are going to hear this and they're going to be like, he's lying. I was an E6 4 years into my military career, which is a staff sergeant in the Army. And I was up for E7, but I couldn't get it because I hadn't been in service for 6 years. And I was like, man, I don't want to wait. And then I was up for promotion, but you have to go to schools. You have to do like certain things. It's time and grade. And I was like, I don't want to do all this crap. And I was like, I just want to be like people. Like, I just want to be better. And it's like the process of getting promoted that I enjoy. It's not actually getting promoted.
Right.
And so it was like, business, I can just work my ass off. And that process is an everyday thing. And that's truly like, I talked to Paul about this, but that's like truly the process that me and Paul agreed on that we love, is like getting in there and doing the due diligence, like getting in there and working that out and meeting the dough, right? And every single day. I love that process. This is why I love bodybuilding too.
Well, then we transition to talk a little bit about, like, you as a coach now and your clients and things. Can you give us just an overview of this, roughly what type of clients you work with? What does that mix of clientele look like?
Yeah. So initially, the clients I worked with were pretty much strictly people interested in like performance, whether that was athletes of a certain nature, with strongman, powerlifters, or bodybuilders. I just kind of extrapolated my knowledge. I had a degree in science and nutrition at the time, and really tried to just level them up with nutrition. And then it evolved more into, okay, well, I see an opportunity here to expand and grow. I'm not super interested in working with average people, not to be rude, but like, it's just, it's exciting to work with a competitor because you can see changes every week. You can get feedback that's really powerful every single week. And that's exciting to be in that process. So I was like, well, what I could do is expand a team and build a full out team to kind of work in that direction while I work on my passion project. Right. And that's exactly what I did. And I basically hired 2 coaches full-time to manage clients. And then basically, I taught them and mentored them how to do everything, read blood work, try to associate cause and effect between coaching and client relationships, and ultimately expanded that group. And then I got, a media crew, and then I got a sales crew, which is like a whole nother thing. But it just became, for me, it was like, I want to build a business so I can live the lifestyle and coach people that I love to coach, and like focus on that. Now, don't get me wrong, I coach all sorts of people, but their problems are a little bit advanced. So you were talking about H. pylori and SIBO and things like that. Like, those are the kinds of cases I love to work. I love to get a profound result. Being honest, like, general weight loss is fairly easy. It's everyone, when everyone says like, I just don't know how to lose weight, I'm like, yes, you do. It's you move a little bit more and you put the fork down some. But sometimes the cases get complex and there is issues that are present, and there's some metabolic insufficiency, and being able to address that and turn someone's life around and improve, symptoms of depression. We've all been there. We've helped someone through some really dark times, and that's what I love. So I try to focus more on those things, but generally I say probably 2/3 of our clientele is general population, sort of people looking for help, advancing their blood work and health parameters, longevity. We work with a lot of people focused on longevity and strictly like using pharmacology and health things, right, to level up longevity. But I'm more focused on the other 1/3, who's competitors, creating timelines for them, mapping out the career sort of thing. That's what I'm really invested in.
Yeah, no, I always found it interesting. I would, when I was years ago, when I was a trainer in person, I would call them my bill payers. Like, I love them, but they're just not my ideal client, but they put food on the table, and I still gave them the same attention. But I would go out and seek, and I wouldn't call it a sales pitch, but I would still say, like, from a health perspective, like I would do these assessments we had. And I would say from a health perspective, you don't need a trainer. I was like, but if you want to be elite or you want to be at an optimal level, those are the only type of clients I work with. I was like, so, and that from that standpoint, like we both agree you're not there. And the ones that would say, I want that, I was like, cool. You know, it was crazy how many like people either were in contest shape and just said, I don't want to go on stage, or would get pretty dang close. And it was just like, it was pretty cool to see that. And they were doing like really hard, you know, diets and measurements and things, and very calculated. And they were, you know, those are the ones that, because I would tell people, then their friends would want me to work with them. I'm like, guys, the way I do it, it's so precise that I'm not a good like just general coach. Like, yeah, you can have little this, little that. Like it's very, you know, I'm not an atomic physics, you know, masters like Justin, but I'm very much on the math and the you know, forecasting and calculating out like what someone needs and how they metabolize it and all that good stuff. So it was, I can appreciate the different types of clients and kind of how that all works. But I know you do a lot of different, we talked a little about like gut health, you know, can you talk a little more? I'd like to, I recently had a functional nutritionist on our podcast, and a couple of friends of mine that work in that space. So I'm curious to hear more about what you're experiencing, what, you know, just is from a gut health standpoint, and just maybe some common things that people maybe symptoms maybe they have, but they just don't know that there's a gut health issue.
Yeah, I mean, there's, holy crap, that's a lot to unpack, right? Like it's a rough world out there right now. I think a lot of people know it. There's a lot of things in our food, you know, it's no secret, like microplastics are everywhere. It's not really like a he said, she said thing or a woo woo thing. It's like, there's microplastics everywhere. There's these emulsifying agents in a lot of our pre-prepared food that, you know, can tear tight junctions apart, essentially, if you look at how an enterocyte works. And so, you know, basically in the modern world, and you can test your water. You can go to egw.org and see your current zip codes water testing and see all the pollutants in your food in your water. And you can find like, there's this antibiotic, you know, there's doxycycline in my water at this much of a percentage, and that's there, you know. So people are perpetually, you know, impacting their immune system and their GI function and their microbiota. And so when I am working with someone, it's almost always at least a part of me is looking at their guts, and I want to know very specifically how it's functioning and how they're feeling. And a lot of people, especially primary care physicians, simply just don't correlate like depression with GI dysfunction. And you know, the GI is very responsible for serotonin manipulation and creating a lot of neuropeptides that cross the blood-brain barrier very well. Another thing too is it gets very tricky with like females, you know, and we're talking about like estrogen measurements. You know, if a female is suffering from symptoms of low estrogen, you know, she might have also concurrently like GI distress, and your gut produces glucuronidase, which is an enzyme that basically manipulates an estrogen to make it an active form of estrogen. So she might have enough estrogen, but she might not have active estrogen due to that glucuronidase enzyme being insufficiently produced by the appropriate gut microbiota. So like there's just so many different issues that stem from the gut. And what I typically see is that someone along the lines of a competitor or a general population type has some form of gut dysfunction, whether that's easily ameliorated through just a couple diet changes, or maybe it's a bit more intense and it requires a form of a protocol. There's something there. And so how I kind of determine that process or determining what might be wrong is I have a couple checklists I have people go through, but a lot of it is, you know, really honing in on how is your digestion. So I'm asking, like, if you're familiar with the Bristol stool chart, not a lot of people are. And I think, you know, if you're watching this, go look up Google Bristol stool chart and you'll see pictures on the internet. There's 1 through 7 types of stool. You want to be 3 and 4 most often. And I'm like, what types of stool are you having throughout the week? You know, most people are like type 1, type 2, type 7, you know, diarrhea all the week. And I'm like, okay, we're passing stools daily, but if they're looking like this, there's something wrong there, right? I ask people how much they're having gas, right? Like I want to know, hey, are you eating and then passing gas like immediately? Is it pretty raunchy gas? You know, when you eat, do you find that your lower abdomen is distended? Are you getting like a sniffly nose, or is your throat kind of swelling up? There's all these different kind of things we can look at. And usually people are suffering from one of those things and they just think it's inconsequential because they've had it for so long. You know,
Right.
When you take like an unhealthy person from eating McDonald's every day, like, oh, I feel fine. What do you mean? And then you show them kind of the way of eating real food, and they're like, oh, I feel really good. And then they eat McDonald's again. They're like, holy crap, I feel like shit. It's
Right.
like they had to come out of that water to see what they really felt like. So a lot of these people just don't know. And you know, farting more than 18 times a day is highly correlated in clinical research with gut dysbiosis. And like, I know plenty of bodybuilders who fart well over 18
Right.
times, you know, and
Right.
things like that are just so you can slow the, let's just hypothetically say, you know, one of the things I see a lot in bodybuilders, because we eat so much protein, we're taking compounds that can lower stomach acid due to like adrenergic stimulus, is low stomach acid, right? Like bodybuilders have a lot of low stomach acid, and it's a very simple fix, but it can lead to, you know, a plethora of other issues like H. pylori overgrowth, because that stomach acid is going to prevent H. pylori from populating the colon. And so, yeah, man, it goes on forever. Like it is one of probably the hardest things I fight against. We do GI map tests with blood built, and when we're coaching people, we always like to look at stool, as funny as it seems, and see what bacteria are present, specifically because we don't necessarily know what species of bacteria are absolutely correlated with good, but we do know ones that are correlated with bad.
Right.
So if we find what's going on that's bad, maybe we can get an idea of what we need to do. Sometimes that does look like an antibiotic protocol. Sometimes that looks like using rifaximin for a couple of weeks. Sometimes that's, you know, hey, include more fermented vegetables, kimchi, sauerkraut, you know, dairy products into your diet. We'll get her fixed. But yeah, it's all over the place.
Yeah, no, it's interesting too, because I know a lot of the symptomology of that can be counterintuitive. Like I know a couple come to mind. One was someone with a low gut acid, but they were having a lot of
acid reflux.
And it was like, you would think you have, so they kept thinking they have too much.
Yeah.
So now they're pounding Tums, which is lowering it even more. And it's just this chronic cycle that you keep making the problem worse, because it's temporarily giving you relief,
right?
But you really have to fix, you know, the amount, because you don't have enough is why that's coming up. And that was really fascinating for me when I first heard that. And I actually seen another, well, more than once, but I saw a situation with estrogen methylation where the individual was producing lower estrogen later, you know, just a little later in life, not totally menopausal, and they were estrogen dominant symptoms. So on blood work, they're not producing enough estrogen. Their symptomology is estrogen dominance. Well, what we found out was they were not methylating estrogen efficiently. And so basically in that like phase 3, like right when it's going to the liver, and kind of some of those enzymes and such, it was getting essentially, like layman's terms, backed up. And then it was kind of causing some of that, you know, that spillover of like the estrogen dominance, if you will. So it's like, it's really interesting when you look at the full picture, what people can see, you know, not just from gut and metabolism. I think it's really important too, because a lot of guys think like you know, bodybuilders, like you could be getting in more good, healthy quality, just to even go on the other extreme. I was talking a little female there, but more in like the size side of things. Like think of how much more, you know, meat and rice you can pound down if you have a good, healthy gut that can actually digest it better, and nutrient absorption, and you can just get more in because you're not, you know, bursting at the seams. So is that something you also work on, is people being able to like eat into a diet and kind of grow from that standpoint?
Yeah. That's a huge part of it too, is like, you know, calories are king in almost every situation, whether that's down or up. Like they're going to make the most change to your body. And that's exactly true. Like if you can't eat, you just don't have an appetite. We hear bodybuilders all the time, I don't have an appetite. Well, why is that? Because we should be, you know, after a while, you should adapt to the diet you have and develop an appetite. And if there's not, like, you're not going to grow, man. You got to eat, you know?
Right.
And so,
or they say they eat, sorry to cut you off, but or they say they eat too much, right? Like, I eat all the time, and it's like, just mathematically, it's not how this whole thing works. Like you're not eating enough and not gaining weight. Sorry.
No, yeah, it's so factual. And so I always look at things, especially with bodybuilders, like because we tend to forget, like the liver is one of the many first digestive organs in the system, right? It's before your intestinal tract. So understanding that the liver is part of that. It produces bile salts. It gets rid of all these metabolites. It helps produce and convert hormones like all over across the body. Understanding, because us bodybuilders, we do damage our liver quite a bit from heavy training, high carbohydrate diets contributing to fatty liver disease. We take, some oral 17 alkylated compounds that do contribute to, not the best hepatic system. That stuff impacts the GI and downstream from there too. So it's all connected. And I find on prep, actually, most people's GI function improves, and it's mostly because there's less food burden. There's not as much cheat food, and there's more movement. So things start to speed up. Yeah. And then you're able to make sure that the food they are eating is very nutritious. It's fulfilling all the 150 essential nutrients, and things start kind of spinning up really rapidly. And that's where you can, like, closer to the end of a show, you can really push up food because they're able to assimilate it so much more rapidly, and you see the response almost immediately. And it's like, people know this feeling, right? Like when you're at the end of a show, one, you're more insulin sensitive, but I believe your digestion is just so efficient. You can eat, 400, 600, 1,000 grams of carbs and then wake up the next day a pound lighter. Yeah, that wouldn't happen in off season, and usually it's because you're slow. Your digestion isn't as kinetic, and there's probably some issues there pre-existing.
Yeah, I saw a show one time. It was like a body transformation show, and I thought it was so cool for, more general population people. Maybe some of them might compete someday in physique, but majority won't. But the fact that like they had an end date, so they could really like get down low for them and see all those improvements, and then maybe they coast. Okay, maybe they put on 5 back of the 70 or 80 they lost, but then they would do it again because there would be like 2 shows a year, and they made a big event. And I just thought that was a cool way. Again, how many people are going to do that? But I think there is some value in just, people in general getting moving and, cutting down more and kind of all those improvements that you talked about. Cause I think it just really, in our society, the type of food, the quantity we have access to and the quality, it works against us. So, one of the posts you had on here, I did want to unpack a little bit about food. Is the title is red meat bad for you? So, can you walk through just what that entails and your thoughts on red meat?
Yeah, boy, this is a heated topic. I've definitely upset a lot of people talking about this, but if you factually take foods and place them in order of per gram, how much nutrients they have, you're going to find eggs, red meat, and liver at the top. Now, I'm no carnivore guy. I'm an omnivore. I love all foods. I eat all foods, but there's something to be said about the nutrient density of those foods. Now, you would hear mainstream media say that, like, hey, these things aren't good for you. You should actually avoid red meat. It'll give you heart disease and cardiovascular disease, and you'll get, heart attacks when you're 30 years old. It's just a crock of, can we swear on here? I don't even.
Sure.
Okay. It's a crock of shit. Like you only absorb about 15 to 20% of the dietary cholesterol you consume. Most of it is endogenously produced by your own liver, your own hepatic system. When we're looking at a cholesterol level, it's so irrelevant. And that's when people are going to pinpoint red meat's not good for you because it has cholesterol. You're only absorbing 15% of that. Some people less, right? So that is not the problem with cardiovascular disease. And likely cholesterol isn't the problem, because we need to look at lipoprotein counts, not necessarily the total cholesterol volume or amount and the amplitude of it. So first of all, like, the whole idea that red meat, saturated fat causes heart disease, I just don't personally believe. There's a lot of correlations to saturated fat being having negative outcomes for cardiovascular disease, but there's also a lot of correlations showing the opposite, and they're very good and refined studies. And it's this dichotomy you see with almost any topic, with training to failure or not training to failure, with eating a high protein diet to eating 1 gram per pound of body weight. We see these huge shifts and dichotomies within PubMed, and they call it PubMed paralysis. Like, you just get so absorbed in the data, and you start to woefully believe one side. I personally believe that red meat is very nutritious. It can be leveraged to get, especially in like a dieting phase. Bison, for example, can give you a plethora of the B vitamins you need. Choline, which is extremely important for nervous system function. And talking about muscle contractions and building contractile tissue, like, you need acetylcholine to fire that motor unit to actually contract those muscle fibers. Well, acetylcholine comes from choline, which comes from red meat, eggs, and organs. Like, you can leverage these things in a season of even cutting to get more performance amplitude. I just think it's sort of hysterical when people say like, this is exactly bad. So I always like to kind of oppose opinions of what is generally assumed to be bad. You know, is smoking bad? Well, yeah, it's definitely bad. We can see that it's bad, but it also, you know, not many smokers have Alzheimer's, right? Nicotine is extremely powerful at preventing your cognitive decline, neurodegeneration through its nicotinamide receptor action, right? And so to say something's hopefully bad is just, I disagree with it. So that's like, I could talk all day about that topic, you know, and
it's funny.
Cholesterol, just, it doesn't get absorbed like people think it does. And it's just like, it's not like you eat an egg and it's like all this cholesterol just goes into your bloodstream. You're producing most of your cholesterol. And if you have a high cholesterol, it's likely due to a really shitty metabolic system, not the food you're eating, you know? So
yeah, no, it's interesting. Just, you mentioned, I was listening recently. I guess I kind of heard this before, but then like people that don't smoke, but they use like the nicotine gum.
Yeah.
Because like someone who's doing a big presentation or, you know, something, or like a big study or something, like they're taking that just to, you know, as far as the neurological benefits and the focus.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
I use nicotine patches occasionally. Yeah.
So yeah, I just found that really fascinating. That and then on the flip side of it, I remember years ago when I heard of like politicians using beta blockers.
Yeah.
When I had to go public speak, I was like, oh yeah, I was like, makes sense. I'm like, I wouldn't have thought of it. But there's all kinds of performance enhancements out there, and they're the same people that will pick one type of performance enhancement and just dog on it. It's like, well, didn't you just pop some beta blockers and nicotine before you came up to give your public address or whatever? So
Right.
We had a couple other good ones on here I want to get to, because we haven't talked to guests about this before. So I know there's a slew of stuff we could talk about that others have talked about on here. And again, we'll have to somehow fit it all in. But, you know, talk about improving sleep with nutrition on one of your posts. So can you just unpack a little bit of your findings and what you've seen with sleep improvement through nutrition?
Yeah. So one thing I will say is, if people want to shortcut this, and this is no plug, but you guys have an amazing sleep product, Hit the Rack. It's like, has everything I'm about to talk about. But what I personally look at is, you know, serotonin is converted into melatonin, and a lot of people forget that. So they'll directly mainstream melatonin to get to bed. What the problem is with that is, when we convert serotonin in our brain, naturally it happens over a very long duration. There's a very large area under curve, so it keeps us asleep because it's like this slow undulating process. When we take melatonin, it's just like it hits us and it's out of the system, and so likely you'll fall asleep, but you won't stay asleep. Now, in order to convert that serotonin to melatonin, we require vitamin B6, and this is something that is in abundance within like a whole food-based diet. Again, red meat is a great opportunity to get a ton of vitamin B6, but a lot of people are deficient in it, or we're heavy working athletes. We sweat a lot, we move a lot, we expend a lot of these water soluble and even fat soluble vitamins and minerals. And we need maybe more than what the recommended daily value is, or even the adequate daily value. And so getting a abundance of vitamin B6 through things like red meat, dark leafy cruciferous vegetables, various foods is highly beneficial to improving sleep quality. And you can also leverage that by increasing your intake of amino acids like L-tryptophan and tyrosine, which are going to be the precursor molecules to neurotransmitters like serotonin. So if you have a diet with abundance of these amino acids, you have the precursors to create serotonin in the brain, and you have an abundance of vitamin B6. You can convert serotonin into melatonin, and you have restful sleep. Another really powerful thing is endogenous insulin secretion can help one sleep extremely well. So a lot of people tend to remove carbohydrates before bed because of the fear of, you know, having that resting blood glucose and insulin circulating at a high level prior to bed. But that can actually help you sleep. And we know from tons of research that if one sleeps like a good 8 hours, they're far more insulin sensitive and less inflamed in the mornings compared to people who get less sleep. So maybe you do sacrifice, you know, having a little bit of a lower fasting insulin around the bed window. But when you wake up, you're highly recovered and you have much more insulin sensitivity. So those are kind of the main things I use.
I was gonna say I've heard that. I have heard that both ways, as far as not having it, 4, 6, 8 hours before bed versus like having it right before bed. And a lot of people, to your point though, they can just go to the last time you had a really high carbohydrate meal. Like, how did you feel? You wanted to, lay down, put your feet up, like you were fatigued from it. Yeah, I'm curious too, because one of the things we're actually reformulating. When I say reformulating, not because it's bad, we're trying to update it to improve it. Hit the rack with L-theanine, adding that into the mix. Have you had any experience with clients using that? I mean, part of it is Justin. I defer to him for the specifics on formulation. I'm just very biased to it because I've seen great results from it. But I'm just curious your feedback on L-theanine.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. I don't think, like, again, I think you can get a lot of this stuff from your own diet. Like, I don't think I think it can be used in an acute context. So that's where it would be beneficial in a product like that, right? You can get a high dose of it in an acute setting. But that's why we use a lot of supplements, right? Is because people's diets aren't necessarily in abundance of that,
Right.
or maybe because we have to remember too, like, amino acids aren't going to be circulating in your blood for a very long time. So getting something like L-theanine in at a large dose prior to bed can be actually highly beneficial to creating those precursor molecules and keeping you asleep. So I think it's great personally. I don't think it's like the game changer. I think if your habits are out of whack, it's still not
gonna,
a huge difference, but
yeah.
I think it's going to help you get restful sleep. I'm not actually aware of any like human data that supports how, if it like keeps you asleep or if it puts you to slow wave sleep any better. So I'd be interested in to see that. I guess Justin would probably be the guy to defer.
Yeah, and in my situation, I know me personally because I went through. I was on Ambien for years, so a combination of things that just rest my brain a little bit or kind of slow some of that. I guess you would call it anxiety, but it's more just overthinking and things that seem to help me. I don't know that it necessarily made me sleepy. It just kind of helped
Yeah.
some of those effects. Like if it was like magnesium, I can feel like if I hit a hot tub and I have like magnesium or
Yeah.
theanine, valerian root, any of those things, like it doesn't knock me out by any means, but it just gets my mind
Yeah.
set to like, I'm ready. I'm okay. I can lay down now. Cause if not, I'm not even laying down. Like, it's like, it's still go time. What do you
Right.
mean? It's like I haven't slept in 2 days, but it's still go time,
Yeah. I mean, that's the nice part about L-theanine, right? Is because it's structurally similar to glutamate. I was going to say glutamine. It's glutamate in the brain, which allows it to potentially like block glutamate receptors in your central nervous system, which settles you down. So I like it personally. If someone is like the type A individual, they're super, like go, go, go. It's probably similar to you and I, where you get to that surrounding bed window and you're still like working on a project and it's like, shit, I have to go to sleep, or like I'm going to wake up terribly tired tomorrow morning. I think it's a good product to like calm the mind down and stop it from, first stop your heart rate from being excessively high, but in the order of, your central nervous system, like slow your heart rate down, slow breathing down, improve cognitive kind of mobility, and allow yourself to calm down. So
yeah. As we kind of shift a little bit with cardiovascular training, is there anything you've seen? I know you from looking at your content, you spend a lot of time reading up on things and obviously applying it to your clients. What's your approach generally to cardiovascular from like a competitor, and then maybe even like kind of a general population approach?
yeah, so I'm actually very similar to Justin on this. I love HIIT cardio for a lot of people. I think that ability to train your heart to increase heart rate, drop heart rate, increase heart rate is very helpful, especially in a training setting when you can apply that in training endurance, right? Like if I can do 3 more reps on a leg press because I can have that oxygen carrying capacity,
Right.
compared to the guy that can't, like those are 3 more reps that could potentially stimulate hypertrophy. And I got that through a little bit of HIIT. I think that's worth it in and of itself. But when we talk about being, fuel efficient, like a great instance where I would love to use HIIT is transitioning into an off season from an off season to a competition prep. What HIIT cardio specifically can do, doing interval training, which is like, balls to the walls for some amount of time, usually 30 to 60 seconds, and then, resting or slow pace cardio for another 30 to 60 seconds and repeating back and forth. You get a ton of cardiometabolic adaptations. So you get, mitochondrial biogenesis, and with more mitochondria, we're going to be able to beta oxidize or burn fat better. And so if someone's jumping into a prep in a very unconditioned state, and they've probably, in all honesty, had a epigenetic change and a down regulation in mitochondrial function, it can be hard and a little bit laggy to get fat loss to occur. But if you're keeping them metabolically fit, by doing just small proportions of HIIT cardio, it can be an easy transition to going from an off season to dropping fat quite immediately with that efficiency in play. And then it also makes the lower intensity steady state cardio, which I use as like the bulk share of my prep cardio, a lot easier too, because it's certainly not as hard as HIIT. And it's, when you're conditioned to do HIIT, you're easily going to get down with the list or the low intensity steady state cardio.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I really like different types of intervals for a number of reasons, but one of the things I think a lot of people, and again, in a prep, this may be overanalyzing it, but I think for general fitness improvement, call it, you can control speed or resistance. So like incline or speed, but you can also use time, like do it for a minute, off for a minute, or 30, whatever. And then you can use heart rate, like we're going to go, just go 1% incline as fast as you can to hit 160 beats per minute. And then you're going to go, I'm making this up, but 3.5 miles per hour until you drop to 135. And then you're going to go back up so that you can, it's like weight training. You know what I mean? Like there's so many different facets to adjust. And it's been a while since I've done more detailed cardio programming, but depending on the person and their lifestyle, it was like, how can I get the most bang for my buck? This person's so busy, like they don't have the time, or what are their goals? Like I can actually increase, their cardiac output and just overall the recovery time. That was the goal for a phase. And then, just kind of going through that. So it's interesting because, and if they're having a bad day, like maybe that level 15 on the Stairmaster just is getting you to 175 when normally it would get you to 160. So I like the combination of all the different measurements, if you will, that you can kind of play with, and then depending on what you're doing. But I think the key is there too, to still stay consistent. You can't just roll the dice one day and go to the next and those type of things. So
no, I think that's a really good idea. Actually, I've never thought about doing the heart rate thing. That'd be a lot more, I guess that'd be way better for someone who's not so driven, because you can actually give them like very hard points. Like, all right, just saying go all out. You can say, objectively, I want you to hit this heart rate. And they're working when they're doing that.
Yeah, I was really fortunate. I got to spend quite a few years using, we called it metabolic testing, where they wore the mask and, we could measure their RQ values and their outputs and all that. And that was pretty cool, because you could go, all right, you're going to hit 160 and hold it for 5 seconds and then recover. And then like over the course of however long, let's try to get you to 160 and hold it for 30 seconds, where there's no chance you could ever hold that. You could tell, like, look, like your output is this, but at this heart rate now, and then you could look back, like you were doing 5.8 miles per hour at 160. Now you're at 7.2, so you have all those different measurements that you can kind of use as, how do I put it? Like use as progress points, because some people, they just, for whatever reason, they just have their one measurement. Like, general pop, it's like the scale. Bodybuilder is going to be a picture or whatever, but it's like, there's so many different things to do that. So yeah, no, just found that pretty interesting. But I want to circle back to the beginning. One thing we didn't talk about. So I noticed in a lot of your posts too, you talk about cerebral palsy. Can you tell the viewers out there, and I can't believe I missed that in our intro when we're going through this. We just kind of jump right in. But why do you talk about cerebral palsy so much, and where does that come from?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm very fortunate. There's a lot of people who have cerebral palsy, and that's kind of why I post about it a lot, who are, very physically disabled. Like they're either bound to a wheelchair or they have to walk in canes. I'm sure many people have seen kind of what that looks like. It's a neurological disorder. Basically, you can't control muscular contractions or the function of muscles. And so you get skeletal disorders because muscles form around bones, bones form around muscles. When one's disordered, the other one also is. So it can be very deleterious to people, and that's why I post about it a lot. I have cerebral palsy. It's very mild. So I'm fortunate. If we're a very careful observer. If you've ever seen me on stage, you'd notice that one leg is quite bigger than the other leg. I hide it really well with posing, thankfully. And I train my ass off to try to equate the two legs. But I basically can't control my right leg from my knee down.
Okay.
So if you were asking me to like curl my toes right now, I could absolutely do it with my left foot. I could not do anything with my right foot. I can barely even feel my right foot. So that's really the extent of my problems. Of course, it extends through the whole right side of my body. It affects the left side of my brain. It affects the right side of my body. And so like, there's little things here and there that I can move my scapula, but I know it's not moving quite as well as my left scapula.
Sure.
And so like, I just took this journey on bodybuilding. It's why I had such an interest in coaching and learning more about the human body, to advance myself past what I perceived as limits that the doctors gave me. They said, hey, I'd be in a wheelchair by the time I was 30, because it's degenerative. Like, you slowly lose function if you're not using that function. And I was like, fuck that, like, no way. So I really just researched. That's where I got into like muscle, right? As I like researched how to build muscle, how does muscle function? How does a motor unit work? Like, what is the prerequisites to a motor unit? How do androgens work, and how do they stimulate muscle growth in particular areas? And that just kind of led itself down to being where I'm at now with the amount of knowledge I have, is because I wanted to circumvent cerebral palsy, or at least be better than what I was told I could be.
Yeah.
And that's why I post about it to this day. Is like, I think it's not like the most impressive achievement in the world, but it's something that I think people can look at and at least say like, okay, I might not be Chris Bumstead, but I can look pretty fucking good as long as I put the work in. And I try to, with my YouTube channel and stuff, I try to show how hard I train and how much, like, I tell people this all the time. Like, I haven't missed a meal in probably 3 years, like 6 meals a day, and it's that consistency, that work ethic will get you there. It'll get you 90% of the way. Genetics will get you the 10%. That's the top 20 in the Olympia, but it's so important to show people that just because you have this thing, it doesn't have to be cerebral palsy, but you have anything, right? Like any kind of malfunction in the human body, like, you can still be great. And it just requires maybe more work, but work. And that work is not a bad thing. And people perceive it all too often as a bad thing.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really great message. I appreciate you sharing that, because, it's kind of, everyone has their obstacles. I seen your post and was like, I just, when I first started seeing your content, I was like, why is he posting about that? And then I had to, once I put 2 and 2 together, I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I was like, wait a minute. Is he being serious with that? Like, because like you said, you've overcome it so well that I didn't know what you meant by it. It was just, so I think that's a really great message for people out there. Everyone has, their obstacles and challenges, and it's just an example of how you can work to overcome that. So
yeah, it's funny because a lot of people will say like, oh, you're faking it, there's no way. And I was in a cat, like, when you're, like I said, your bones kind of misform because the muscle's not surrounding them. It's just not functional, or it's hypertonic, so the muscle's contracting chronically. That was my calf. So my right foot was twisted inwards like this, so I had to wear like a skeletal brace to reform my bone back, and that was fucking painful for a lot of my childhood. And I have tons of pictures of me wearing this cast and me walking funny and stuff like that. And so like, people always say, oh, you're faking it. I'm like, no, dude, like, I grew out of this stuff. Like, I trained out of it. And I'll show pictures of like me in that cast, or like me. I have this one picture of me in Halloween. I'm dressed as like a ninja, and I'm standing next to my cousin, and she's like walking down the street, and I'm walking too, but my foot's like this, I'm walking like this.
Yeah.
And it's just like, people don't understand, but you can develop muscle and control of your muscle. It's just it's not going to be as good as, you might be in an instance, but.
Sure. No, I appreciate you sharing that. Well, I know we're coming up on time here, so I want to be respectful of your time. We definitely have a ton more we could unpack, but before we break, one thing we always do is a round of rapid fire questions. We call it shoot, move, communicate. So I will navigate us through these questions if you're ready for them. We got generally their short answer or a single word, but I'll kind of prompt you through it, and we'll go from there. So you ready to get rolling?
Let's do it.
All right, good deal. What accomplishment in coaching has made you most proud?
Oh, probably, it sounds silly, but getting one of my best friends, his name is Parker. getting him qualified for nationals under like the most amount of pressure in the world. Like he just had his second kid, like during that prep. His wife was, going to law school at the time, and family was just like in 8 different places all at once, and managing him and his mindset was so hard. And obviously, like, we had the connection of him being my best friend, right? And seeing him walk across the stage after literally like a 26-week prep, it took forever. And securing that qualification for this year was like the most emotionally driven thing for me, because I had, basically been with him through all the stuff that had happened through the prep, and, heard the stories from him. And when he checked in, I'd be like, oh, fuck, like, he's holding water because he's stressed. What happened? I slept 2 hours last night. Fuck, dude. So having that end product result in a nationals qualification, winning an overall, like, that was absolutely probably one of the best moments I've ever seen. Just having this whole family there, watching them like cheer him on, and me being just a part of that system was absolutely just more than I could have ever asked for.
Good deal. Well, next up, we'll ask a question. What about accomplishment in your competitive life that has made you most proud? What would that be?
Oh man, that's a good one. I'm never satisfied with myself, unfortunately. I think, me kind of jumping into the scene relatively unknowledgeable initially, and winning my national pro card, just like I said, through blunt force trauma, was pretty impressive. I don't know many people who could sustain 8 weeks of 75 minutes of cardio twice a day, and literally eating meat and vegetables for that long. And it was it was hell, but it was like, cool, like, this is what we got to do. And at the end of the day, I was really happy with myself, and I learned a lot. People will say the military is hard. People will say, working a labor job is hard. Like, I 100% am full force into, like, bodybuilding can be the hardest thing in the world, and it can put you in the darkest places. And for me, that was like a very big pivotal moment in my life, where I learned a lot about myself personally, and the time I spent alone showed me a lot of who I am. So it wasn't necessarily accomplishment because I won, but it was because I shifted from the guy who was just kind of normal to a competitor, going like balls to the walls, like, you know better, but did it anyways, and got some results. That's kind of went through the journey, more or less, the hero's journey.
Awesome. No, good stuff. Well, the next question I won't ask, but I'll still say it. We usually say our products here at First Detachment are battle tested. So can you describe the situation or time of life when you're battle tested? I think you pretty much knocked out of the park with the cerebral palsy example and working through that. So I don't think you can top that one, but let's see here. Well, what would be one word of encouragement to like a young and up and coming competitor? What would that be for you?
Yeah, discomfort. I'm a huge proponent, and I post about a lot. Find discomfort. If you're comfortable, you're losing. There's some motherfucker out there who's uncomfortable as hell right now, but he's making progress. And the longer you sit around comfortable, sitting nice and lazy, the more time you're wasting, that closer that other guy gets out there. And this is true in business, in relationships, in bodybuilding, in almost any endeavor. Rest assured, if you're comfortable, you're not working hard enough.
Yeah, no, it's great. I appreciate that. All right, we got another one. If you had to miss one, what would it be? A meal, a night of sleep, or a training session?
Oh, that's tough, man. Fuck. I'm honestly gonna say a training session. I'm gonna say a training session. Just from a progression standpoint, I think I wouldn't have as much progress lost if I missed a training session over sleep or food.
All right, good deal. Well, the other thing we like to say around here is we're all in First Detachment. So the question is, what is something you're all in on right now? Like, what's your passion project? What do you have in the works?
Man, my passion project is bigger than I can even comprehend right now. I want to build a business, and I want to be a successful bodybuilder, but more than anything, I want the people I'm surrounded with, this team, like everybody I work with, I want everyone to rise. I want all ships to rise, and I want to be at least a part of it and help that water go up. My end goal is just to have a community of people who know I'm dependable and reliable, and we grow together. And at the end of the day, like, that's what I'm super passionate about, whether that represents itself in my business or somebody else's, or my bodybuilding career or somebody else's. Like, I just want to be a part of it and help everyone succeed. That's really the best I could ask for.
No, I appreciate that. And I know all of our listeners will get a lot of value out of this. So be sure to, give Kolton a follow out there, guys. Check out his content. We'll definitely have him back on in the future. We'll probably do some roundtable stuff with 3 or 4 guests in the future. We're kind of collaborating on some other content that'll come your way, but all the fun YouTube stuff, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. And then always, leave your questions there. If there's something specific maybe we didn't get to tonight with Kolton, either when we have him back on for a Q&A, we'll be able to knock that out, or we'll hunt him down to try to get that answer. So for all of you out there listening, thanks so much, and we'll see you. Have a good night.
Thank you.